All right, I think we are live right now. So let's see if it switched over. Try the link again. All right. Yep. So here we go. Let me just make sure the sound is working as well. Hold on. Try the link again. Yep. All right. So we got the sound working. Anyway, so I wanted to talk about today the Western Conference playoff race because I think it's kind of interesting this year. Obviously, we expect the Warriors and Rockets. I mean, the Rockets probably be number 1 seed, and the Warriors will be number 2. But after that, it gets kind of interesting because everyone's pretty close to each other. So, I think the Blazers probably at this point are looking like they might have that spot locked up. But after that, I mean, OKC is a little bit ahead of Minnesota, but between Minnesota and Denver is the 5 and 10 seed, and it's 2 games amongst all of those teams. So I'm thinking I'm just going to sort of go through each team and see, what I think might happen. I'm going to look at their schedules, and, we can all talk and stuff, and you guys can ask me questions. So I think we're just going to assume at this point that Portland probably has it. Although, with Portland, you never know. I think if Nurkic were to go down for a long period of time, I think they might have some problems because I just don't see a lot of interior defense outside of Nurkic, and he does a pretty good job down there, and he's really made that team better. So, unless he goes down, I think they have it. But if he does go down, I think it's going to be a different conversation. All right. So then we can look at OKC. I think OKC has enough talent where they'll pull through. So I think now we can start with Minnesota. So Minnesota is, Karl Anthony Towns is obviously an Iron Man. Andrew Wiggins is an Iron Man, but I mean, Butler's out right now. And I'm not a huge fan of Wiggins. I think Wiggins is a little bit overrated. I think he hasn't really shown any improvement. And it's just like his numbers have gone up a little bit, since his rookie year, last couple of years because of volume, but they regressed this year, and his efficiency has yet to go up. And without Butler, I mean, that team looks like they've been really struggling lately. This just does not look good. I mean, take a look at their recent schedule. I mean, they at one point I think they were like easily going to take their division, and now it's just, if you look at their upcoming schedule, I mean, they have the Rockets, Clippers, Sixers, Jazz, Nuggets, and then Nuggets again. All of those teams are basically playoff teams. So, it's not going to be an easy schedule for the Timberwolves either. So let me see here. Something's wrong with the stream. Anyways, I think the Timberwolves probably have a decent chance of getting in there, but it's a team that's now missing their veteran playoff tested player. So, it's still a possibility that they don't. So Utah has really been surging lately as well. Utah is really interesting. I don't know how they managed to keep winning with the players that they do the past couple of years, but it seems like they always outplay their talent level. I mean, Gobert is a really nice center, obviously, and Donovan Mitchell's probably should win Rookie of the Year, in my opinion, just because, he's the best player on a team that's competing in a much harder conference. And, still has a really good record. I mean, I love Ben Simmons. He's really fun to watch and stuff, but Donovan Mitchell, it's hard to argue against him. Just because, when you're the best player as a rookie on a playoff team, that doesn't really happen a heck of a lot. So that's pretty interesting. And then, they just have a bunch of guys that are probably role players on most other teams, and they still manage to win a bunch of games. So, I mean, for example, Favors has regressed in the past couple of years. He's actually had some playing time this year. He didn't really have a ton last year, but he's, in his prime, a couple years back, or at least when he was looking like he was heading into his prime, he was looking like he was going to be one of the better power forwards. He's regressed. Gobert has missed a lot of time this year as well. Gobert missed a bunch of time because of the Whiteside thing. I think it was the Whiteside that did that. I don't know if it was Whiteside or no, it was Waiters that did that against the Heat. Dante Exum just came back too, but I don't really have high hopes for him. He's not, he hasn't shown anything yet, but he did just come back from injury. I mean, if you look at this roster, it's really fascinating. You wonder how they've been able to win this many games. I think, Quinn Snyder, I think in the past couple of years, he's shown that he can, be a pretty good coach there. I mean, he's taken a lot of subpar teams in the past couple of years and, put them on the map, especially last year. So, it's definitely pretty interesting. I think the Jazz can probably slip in there. They're really hot right now, and I just don't see them cooling down. Then we have the Spurs as well. And the Spurs, if the Spurs don't make the playoffs, that would be something, because I don't think they've missed the playoffs since before Tim Duncan. So that would be, over 20 years since they missed the playoffs. I could be wrong, but I don't think they've missed it since Tim Duncan was drafted in 97. So that would be nuts if they missed it. I don't see them. I don't know. So it says, like the Kawhi Leonard injury thing is really bizarre, because, they're actually claiming that he has an injury, but there's also rumors that he's just refusing to play. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And again, he came out and said he wanted to leave and he was really frustrated. And then he said, oh, no, wait, never mind. I want to stay. I'm going to be in San Antonio. I think there's some turmoil in there. And I think that Greg Popovich might sort of be losing control of the team, especially since, the guys from the Spurs, sort of dynasty era are either getting older or have already, retired, like Tim Duncan. Tony Parker, I'm not sure, if he's going to play next season. I mean, he's still playing at a decently high level, but again, I don't know at what point does he want to hang it up. And same with Ginobili. I mean, do they want to go out on top, or, do they want to go out at least with a semblance of, dignity, or do they want to go the Vince Carter route? I mean, I guess it just depends on when they want to end their careers. Like, they can still produce for this team. It's just a matter of, do they want to go out looking good, or do they want to go out looking like Vince Carter? And they just haven't been able to replace some of those guys. I mean, Kawhi's an excellent player, but when the Spurs were, sort of in that dynasty era, it wasn't just based around one player. I mean, Tim Duncan was obviously the best player, but they had a variety of ways they could score, and they were also playing a lot of, team type ball, and, they had a system that worked. They have not been able to sort of replenish the talent within that system. They haven't been able to bring in a player like Tony Parker. LaMarcus Aldridge is a decent offensive player, but he's nothing like Tim Duncan. He's not anywhere near the kind of player Tim Duncan is. Aldridge is sort of a modern era type big man in the same way, that you see guys like a sort of, I guess I don't want to say Chris Bosh, because I like Chris Bosh more than Aldridge, but you see a lot of those types of guys, and you don't see the standard power forward anymore in a way that you used to. And, Tim Duncan and Kevin Garnett were during that era. But Aldridge is just not, he's not a bad defender, but he's not a good defender. He's not going to, Tim Duncan was a defensive player of the year type of, player for a long time, who could also play the 4 and 5 and willingly played the 4 and 5. I don't think Aldridge is capable of playing the 5 long term, just because, lack of rebounding, first of all. And he's not a great rim protector in the same way that Duncan was. And then if you look at the rest of their roster, I mean, Pau Gasol's old, and he's just not the defender he used to be. Patty Mills is an okay player, but he's not anything more than a role player. And then, Danny Green obviously got a bigger contract because they valued what he brought, which is fine. It's a 3-and-D type of thing. But, he's not going to get any better. And it looks like since he got that contract, he's actually sort of regressed. He had a couple of really good years, but we pretty much know what we're getting with him. And, it's something where, it's something, he's not going to make any splash in terms of what he's going to do. And then, obviously they've tried to sort of bring in guys over time. Rudy Gay seems to be kind of a bust there as well. He's not really playing. He missed a bunch of games as usual, and it doesn't really seem like he's meshing. And so Kawhi is really their main and only hope, in my opinion. And if they can't get that to work, and if they basically drive Kawhi away, they're in some pretty big trouble, because they just haven't been able to bring in the kind of guys that not only are, good enough to keep them relevant, but fit within their system. And so it's just something where they really have to do something like what they did when they got Kawhi. So they have to take some of these veteran role players and try and draft like a new prospect or something like that. And they've done a pretty good job in the past of sort of picking out talent, but it's definitely something where, you know, the drop off was inevitable, especially now that Kawhi's at odds with Popovich. So I guess we'll see what happens with them, but I do think that the end might be coming. And it's unfortunate because, you know, growing up, I watched the Spurs basically have their dynasty, and it was really, really cool to watch because it was a system that seemed to be almost like Bill Belichick in the NFL, where you can just basically plug and play anybody. And as long as you had certain guys in certain spots, like, you know, for example, Tim Duncan, you know, playing power forward at all times, kind of like the Tom Brady type thing. As long as you had certain guys and certain caliber of players, you could really plug and play any role players. And that's a system that we have not seen in the NBA in a pretty long time, something that's really just been so fluid. And it's kind of sad that it's coming to an end. So if the Spurs don't make the playoffs, that would be pretty sad. And I think that might sort of be the start of maybe they might have to start almost rebuilding, and, you know, and that's sad because, you know, I love watching them, and the way they play is really, really fascinating. And, you know, they've really been able to adapt at every stage, but looks like they just haven't been able to replenish what they have. Next up is the Pelicans. This is interesting. The Pelicans look better without DeMarcus Cousins. And I mean, I like DeMarcus Cousins. Don't get me wrong. I like DeMarcus Cousins. The Pelicans look better without him. And I'm almost not surprised. Like, Cousins is the kind of guy, I sort of see him as maybe, this might be unpopular, the Russell Westbrook of big men almost. So he's incredibly talented, can do everything, and is just crazy to watch. But you don't really realize the side effects, the negative side effects that he might have on your team. And, you know, he's the kind of guy that, you know, he can either shoot you into a game and into a win, but he can also shoot you right out of one. And he has that same sort of problem that Westbrook has, and Westbrook had last year, where if he started missing shots, he'll get frustrated, and then he'll start making more and more mistakes. And you saw Westbrook shoot the Thunder out of a bunch of games at the end of the year last year. He started missing shots. He would get frustrated, and then he'd start shooting more, and he'd miss more. And, you know, he'd shot the Thunder right out of a bunch of wins. I think Cousins is sort of that same type of player where he knows he's probably the best player on the court, but he doesn't recognize when he's struggling in the same way. And it seems like his frustration gets the better of him, and he'll go on, you know, far too many cold streaks and make a lot of bad plays. You know, you don't see a lot of big men turning the ball over 5 times per game. I think that's sort of a symptom, you know, in the same way that, you know, Westbrook has the symptom. Westbrook can light up a game, but he can also shoot you right out of it. And Anthony Davis is not nearly as offensively skilled, I would say, as, you know, Cousins. I think Davis is a really, really good player. Cousins is probably one of the most complete offensive players in the entire league. But what Davis doesn't do, in the same way that what Cousins does, Davis doesn't have that same mentality of, I know I'm the best offensive player in this game, so I'm going to take it over. And if I miss, then I'm just going to keep shooting. And Davis is somebody that has shown that he can play sort of more within an offense. And as a result, I mean, his efficiency's always been higher. He's also a better defender overall than Cousins. And I mean, Cousins is a better passer. But again, I think, and this is something I love Nikola Jokic, for example. I think the idea of having a big man that's the facilitator is a little bit overblown. I don't think you really need that. You look at the best teams in the league, they don't, you know, Draymond Green, I guess, is the best example of a guy who's maybe playing like the 4 or 5 that's facilitating, but Green sort of plays within that offense. So again, I like Jokic, and I love, you know, the way Cousins plays. I don't know if you need a big man that can pass in that sort of way. And I think it's a phenomenon that you're seeing be sort of gimmicky almost, but again, like, and it's not a bad skill to have, but I think that sort of aspect of a big man's game is becoming more almost overhyped and overvalued. I don't think you need a guy at the 5 to run your offense through necessarily. And I think that Davis sort of can play within the offense. Davis still has scoring moves. Davis can still score the ball. He's not the passer that those other guys are, but he's also more efficient as a result, and he's a better defender. So again, I don't, you know, I think people looked at the Cousins and Davis pairing and said, oh, they work perfectly together because Cousins can run the offense and Davis can be the defender and, guy that scores off the ball and stuff. And I don't, again, I don't know why you want your center to do that in a way. I mean, I think it's a nice skill to have, but the days of running the offense through the center are pretty much gone. And I don't know when the last time a team won that ran. I mean, I guess the Spurs, they ran their offense through Tim Duncan. So it's just something where I think it's a little bit overblown. And I think you're seeing sort of the effect of why it's overblown, the hype about big men passing. Now that Cousins is gone, you're not seeing him, run the offense and facilitate in the same way. And it looks like the offense has improved. And not only that, but it looks like, the defense has improved as well. And, I like I said, I like Cousins. I don't have anything against Cousins. I think his skill set is overvalued. And I think you're seeing the effect of that right now. And the Pelicans are surging. I don't see them missing the playoffs. So next we've got the Clippers. Clippers have really just overplayed their talent level all season. I have no idea how they're doing this. This is really crazy. Them and the Jazz are the two teams this year that are just really wowing me. Tobias Harris is a solid player, and that was a good pickup for them. He can score pretty much all over the court. He's decent rebounder as well. He's not a great defender, but he can hold up. He can also play the 3 and the 4, which is kind of a good skill set to have. Danilo Gallinari is somebody that I've always found to be a little bit underrated. I think one of his skill sets is drawing fouls, and I think he's obviously been injured, but I think when he comes back, if they do make the playoffs, drawing a lot of fouls and getting to the line is definitely something that's very very useful in the playoffs because it wears the other team down. And then Austin Rivers has just been good somehow. I don't know when he became good, but he's actually scoring the ball pretty well this season. And Lou Williams decided at age 31 that he was going to have the best season of his career. He's scoring as a 6-man nearly 23 points per game. That doesn't happen a lot. That's just not really something. I mean, he's also playing starter minutes, so that's it's kind of a little bit skewed. But again, Lou Williams just is continuing to get better and better, it seems like. And he's just, as he gets older, I don't know. He's always been sort of an interesting player. Back when he was on the Sixers, it looked like he was going to be, their starting point guard of the future. And then I think people sort of realize he's not the greatest defender, and he's not really going to be facilitating much. And, he sort of fell into the same role that, a lot of those types of guys fell into. I think it's a good role that, Isaiah Thomas needs to start thinking about embracing. I know he says he wants to be a starter, like in LA and in Cleveland and stuff, but I think Isaiah Thomas's best role is as that 6-man. I think coming off the bench and having that scoring ability, I think it's useful, especially if you're not a good defender, because it's hard to start a guy that can't defend at all. But it's not as hard if you bring them in off the bench just for some quick, burst, just to keep the flow going. So Lou Williams is really interesting. And I'm good for him that he's, still improving and still looking just as good, 10 years later in his career. And then finally we have the Nuggets, and I like the Nuggets. I like Jokic. Jokic is a fun player to watch, but again, I think his skill set is, I think it's overhyped and I think it's overvalued. I think you're seeing the effects of that. And the Nuggets have a pretty solid roster. Jamal Murray looks like he's going to be a star as well. He's really taken a step forward this season, and that's pretty cool to see. I think they're going to need him to become a star because they just don't look like they have any other guys that are going to take that step. Millsap has been injured, which is unfortunate, and he's back now. I really like that signing when it happens. Obviously, the injury sort of hampered it a little bit, but I think Millsap's a pretty solid all-around player. I think he's the kind of guy. He's a two-way player. He can, he can also pass a little bit. He'll do it pretty much everything. And I think that's a good skill set to have on any team. But, I think that the Nuggets, the thing they lack is the same thing that a team like, for example, the Heat lack right now. I'm a Heat fan and stuff, but I think they lack what the Heat lack also, which is, they have a ton of good players and they seem to have good chemistry, and, they've got a lot of guys that can do a lot of stuff. They don't have that kind of star that can take over a game. I think until the Nuggets get that, they're going to be a playoff contending team, but I don't think they're going to take the next step. If Jamal Murray can become that guy, that would be great for them. But, they need to find that kind of guy if they're going to basically take the step into being, a finals contender. And Jokic, unfortunately, as much as I like Jokic is the second or third best player, I think, on a contending team. I don't think he's the kind of guy that you want as your best player. I think he can be a guy on a championship team for sure. And I think there's certain guys that can't be. But I think you're going to need a guard to basically come in, whether it's Murray or whether it's somebody that hasn't gotten there yet. I think they're going to need a guy that can come in and sort of take over a game. And in today's NBA, it's just not the big man anymore. It hasn't been the big man since, I would say, probably Shaq, and it's unfortunate, but you can't really build your offense around a big man anymore. You can't really build your team around a big man anymore. And, even teams that have really, really good young big men and stuff, you look at, the Pelicans, like, everyone loves Anthony Davis. We all love Anthony Davis. He's a really good player, but it's hard for him to win on his own. And until he gets some sort of guard, it's hard to see him winning a championship. And, I think he's going to need some sort of outside presence. And you're seeing that a lot in the league where teams are trying to build around a big man. And, for example, Karl-Anthony Towns was really, really good last year. They were a high lottery team. They add a star guard in Jimmy Butler, and now they're basically contending for the playoffs. And I think that's sort of what people are not failing to realize, or people are failing to realize, is that you can't make a big man basically the center of your team, and it's unfortunate. So, I think guys like Anthony Davis need more guard help, and I don't think Cousins is the answer there. Just like Jokic is somebody who you can have on a winning team. He's a good player. I think even having Jokic and Millsap in there at the same time, I think Millsap provides a little bit more defense and versatility, and Jokic provides a little bit more offense. But I think you need a guard in there, and I think you need a star player, and whether or not Murray can do that, they still need to find somebody. And until they do that, it's unfortunate. I think, the Sixers should also hope that Simmons continues to improve and that Fultz can come back and sort of dominate a little bit. Because again, Joel Embiid is an excellent player, and he might be the exception to this rule if he can stay healthy, because he is just that good. But again, I think they do need somebody on the outside. I think they need a perimeter guy who can, go ISO and you take over a game at the end, because it's just hard to find a team that is a multi-time champion recently, or a team that is a contender that doesn't have at least one guy that can do that. LeBron, for example, has been in the finals 7 years in a row. He's always been able to do that. And Kyrie was able to do that as well. And Kyrie did that in the finals. And you see guys like, Kevin Durant can do it. The Warriors, don't necessarily need to do it. But I've seen, you've seen guys on there that can do that as well. I think the Warriors have the system that can work, but you look at the Spurs, and Kawhi Leonard became that guy. Before that, it was basically Manu Ginobili. Tony Parker could do it. You don't see that sort of guy that can take over the game on a lot of these teams now, and I think that sort of skill set is very undervalued. So, again, I think. So I'll give my opinion now on who I think is going to make it. Obviously, Houston and Golden State will probably stay there. I think we can probably lock in Portland and OKC. I think New Orleans and Utah, in my opinion, are two teams that probably have it. So then we would be looking at Denver, Clippers, Spurs, and Timberwolves. As much as it would be interesting if the Spurs didn't make it, I think you'll probably see Minnesota and the Spurs maintain their spots. Although, if Kawhi comes back and isn't as good, or if Kawhi doesn't come back and then somebody else goes down with injury on the Spurs, I do think you could see somebody, a team like the Nuggets or the Clippers kind of slip into that spot. But at this point, I think the Pelicans are just too hot right now. Utah is looking like a team on the rise. I think OKC and Portland are locked in. I think Minnesota can probably hold on. Although I mean, I guess we'll see. I think Minnesota also could be a team that, if they start going on a losing streak or if they get cold, I think you could see a team like the Clippers sneak up on them as well. So, but I do think that the current top 8 teams are probably the ones that will stay. I guess we'll see. So if anyone's watching has any questions or wants, give me something to answer or have a conversation, feel free to type something in here. Don't really have a ton of people watching right now. Let's see. I can look up some rumors while I wait. Like looking at rumor mills, it's always fun. So, so I mean, in the meantime, there's been this whole thing about tanking. I mean, I've been hearing a lot of people talk about it. I know the Bulls tried to sit Robin Lopez and stuff, and I don't know how I feel. I guess it just, I don't necessarily even have a problem with it. I mean, like, it's kind of an interesting phenomenon because it's shown that it can work with the Sixers, but I guess obviously the fans become the victim of the tank, and especially and I heard this on the radio yesterday. The fans of who don't get to go to the games that much and then go to the games to see their favorite player, and then if for some reason their favorite player is Robin Lopez. I don't know point me to somebody whose favorite player is Robin Lopez. I mean, we'll just take Lopez for example because the Bulls were sitting him. I get the idea that the fan goes to see Lopez, and the fan who doesn't get to go to the games that much wants to see their favorite player. That being said, I think that again, I think tanking has shown to work, and if you do it in sort of the right way, I think. And I don't know if teams would go for this. I'm not sure if they would lose money or anything like that. And I've never seen exactly a team be very open about it, except for the Sixers. But I think if you're honest about the tank and say, like, okay, we're trying to rebuild for the future, wink, wink, meaning like that they're tanking. Because it's one thing to rebuild for the future. It's another to, completely almost throw the season. I think if you're a little bit more honest about your strategy and be like, so, if you want to see Robin Lopez, your favorite player, come play, we might be sitting him because we're trying to look towards the future. Wink, wink. Then I don't necessarily see anything wrong with it, especially, because it's not like they're doing it just to lose. They're doing it to win in the future. And the league is, the NBA is interesting. And I think it's sort of almost rigged against certain types of teams. I think it's rigged against teams that have, smaller markets, can't bring in a ton of fans, and are often fringe playoff teams every single season. So teams, for example, like the Bucks, I think that the league seems to be sort of geared more against teams like the Bucks because, again, the Bucks aren't going to sign a ton of big name free agents, right? They got Greg Monroe is their big, their big name free agent the past couple of years, and that didn't work out. Obviously they drafted Giannis and they got really lucky. They got lucky with him. I mean, he was the 15th pick. But you look at the team like the Bucks, and they're never picking first. And they're always late in the lottery. So, for example, John Henson was the 14th pick of the 2012 draft. And that's the kind of spots that they're picking at almost every single year. I mean, obviously they picked Jabari Parker at second, but outside of that, it's very rare that you see like a team like the Bucks having the number 1 overall pick or the number 2 overall pick. And it's almost rigged against them because when you see a team like them go, 41-41 almost every single year or somewhere around there, they're never going to be so good or, so enticing to free agents that they're going to bring in big names, but they're also not going to be bad enough where they could get the number 1 pick and potentially get, somebody like a Ben Simmons. So again, they got lucky with Giannis, but teams like that really sort of are at a disadvantage. Same with, a team like the Pistons, for example. So the Pistons have had a bunch of lottery picks in recent years, but again, they can't draw in the same big name free agents because not a lot of people want to go live in Detroit anymore. And, they're not necessarily picking in the top 5 every single year. I mean, they seem to be picking top 10 a lot or, lottery a lot, but I can't remember the last time they picked really, really high up. And so it's something that they had Brandon Knight was, I think, a high, like number 8 pick or something in 2011. I mean, Greg Monroe is, the 7th pick, but again, none of these guys are number 1 overall. So I think, and the one time they did have a top 5 pick was Darko Milicic, and they really messed that one up. But like Drummond, for example, was the 9th pick of the 2012 draft, and I think they can't sign these free agents. Like I think when the Blake Griffin trade happened, I heard somebody on the radio say something like, "So the Pistons, the team," or I saw it somewhere, or the Pistons are a team that Blake Griffin wouldn't have even taken a free agency meeting with, and now he's there for the next 5 years. And that's really interesting because if you think about it, that's pretty much accurate. You don't see big name guys like Blake Griffin going to the Pistons, but you also don't see them picking in the top 5 a lot. And so those teams are sort of the ones that, when you think about tanking, those are the teams that it would benefit, right? Because those are the teams that need those high draft picks, but are in a position where they're never going to get them. And they're also never going to get the big name free agents. So when the Sixers basically began their tank, they were a fringe playoff team. Like they were making the playoffs. They made the playoffs, I think, the year before. It was, I mean, weren't they the team that Derrick Rose got the injury to, I believe? Derrick Rose, tore his ACL against them. I mean, they had a pretty decent roster from what I remember. Elton Brand was still playing decently. They had Drew Holiday. They had Evan Turner. I think they still had Thaddeus Young. They had Lou Williams at the time. I mean, they didn't have a bad roster back then. The roster was fine. They had Iguodala, I believe, too. The tank sort of started when they traded for Bynum and traded away Vucevic, they probably got lucky with that because Vucevic is a pretty solid player, but he's not, I think they're probably happy they got rid of him. But their tank sort of started when they realized what I'm saying right now, which is like, oh goodness, we're probably not going to get any big name free agents. Philadelphia is not the most enticing place to play. The fans are kind of mean. Like we have mean people that watch our games a lot of the time who boo Andre Iguodala after he gets traded because I don't know why, or boo Donovan McNabb. All right, I'm getting a little bit personal now. Boo Donovan McNabb after he gets traded. It's not like they left in free agency. Anyways, but when you see, teams like that who sort of realize like, oh no, we're going to be picking maybe 10 to 20 or even top 10, but we're never going to get these number 1 picks because our roster is good enough to keep us winning at least 30 to 40 games per year. But we're also not going to get free agents to take us to the next level. And I think that's when you see Sam Hinkie come in. And I know Sam Hinkie was basically instructed to build a championship team. And I'll give you guys another example. Memphis Grizzlies are a really good example of this. And Memphis is pretty much, a level above some of the other guys. I mean, Memphis did have one high draft pick when they got Conley. They botched the Hasheem Thabeet one too. But Memphis is sort of the same in that you're never going to get the huge big name free agents. So you're going to give 4 years, $94 million to Chandler Parsons. But you're also never going to have those high draft picks. And if you're a team that wins, a certain amount of games every year, you're always going to be in the playoffs or contending for the playoffs, but you're never going to win the championship. And you're also never going to get a high draft pick. And so the Grizzlies look like they're almost attempting to tank this year, which I think would be useful for them because I really do think they need some sort of game-changing player. Actually, they're in position right now. They're in position for the number 2 pick because they're basically second to last behind the Suns. And I think that'll be, kind of a good thing for the Grizzlies to have because, first of all, they overpaid for Mike Conley. I like Mike Conley. Mike Conley's an excellent guy. Seems like one of the highest character guys in the entire league. I've heard he's never gotten a technical foul in his entire time in the league, which is nuts. But I mean, first of all, they've made a series of really bad mistakes, including the Conley contract, which, 50 million. No, it's 30 million per year for the next 5 years. That's a lot of money for a guy who is a solid player. He's an asset on any team. But at that money, that amount of money, I don't know if I even consider him an asset anymore. It's just a ton of cap space taken up. And then they botched the whole David Fizdale thing. I don't know why you would ever fire David Fizdale. He's the absolute best. I love that guy. He's one of the best assistant coaches that he ever had. The Grizzlies were lucky to have him, and they threw it away because Marc Gasol didn't get along with him. And that, that goes to another point. I think they need to, they need to figure out, because I heard other stuff, other talk about how they were perfectly happy to get their 50 wins and go to the playoffs, and that's what their fans wanted. And maybe I've been spoiled as a Heat fan, because I'm a lifelong Heat fan. Maybe I've been spoiled, but I've been a fan of a team that has never been satisfied with mediocrity and has always tried to take the team to the next level. So, for example, the team was really good in the early 2000s, and Tim Hardaway, Alonzo Mourning and stuff. Alonzo Mourning ended up leaving. Hardaway sort of regressed and then eventually retired. And the team sort of was mediocre. And I remember the year with Dwayne Wade's rookie year with, Lamar Odom there that one year. They had Eddie Jones, Brian Grant. The roster was good, right? It was kind of like, for example, it's kind of like the Nuggets. The Nuggets have a bunch of really good players. And they have some they have some good young players. But that can only get you so far. And so, when you're a fan of a team that says, okay, this is an okay roster, how can we make it better and how can we make it a championship roster? Miami happens to be a place where you can get free agents because, it's warm and, it's kind of a nice atmosphere for the most part, although it's kind of a weird city. But they went out and traded for Shaq. And a year later, they won the championship. So I don't know if I'm spoiled as a Miami Heat fan, but I've been a fan of a team my whole life who has had a front office that goes out and tries to become not a good team, but a championship team, and even recently, acquiring, when the Heat were a fringe playoff team, instead of saying, okay, well, we might not make the playoffs, LeBron just left, let's trade some of our guys. They went and got Dragic because they wanted to actually make a playoff run and, become a championship team again. I've never seen the Heat make a move that involved tanking outside of maybe 2007, 2008, when they went 15-67. And that was a really weird year. Shawn Marion basically quit on the team. Wade was injured. Shaq, was traded mid-year. I think the team's best player that season was Ricky Davis in terms of who played a lot of games and scored a few points. Ricky Davis. Ugh. If he's like the main player on your team, you got some problems. But that was the only time I've ever really seen the Heat struggle. And I don't know if I would consider that a tank as much as I think the team's chemistry just fell apart. Pat Riley basically lost control of the team. Wade was injured. Shaq and Pat Riley were at each other's throats. And then after the Marion trade, Marion basically gave up on the team. And there was no farm system there anymore. So again, I think the next year they came back, they drafted Beasley, but that wasn't the only thing they did. They brought in Chalmers from that draft as well. And they eventually traded for Jermaine O'Neal, who turned out to be a better fit than Marion. So, again, I think it depends what kind of front office the team has. But it's hard to it's hard to fault a team's front office for recognizing that this is a star-driven league and understanding that an above-average roster with a bunch of solid players, there's nothing wrong with recognizing that that's not going to win you a championship and choosing to want more. And if you're in a city like, if you're like, for example, the Lakers, you can get those free agents. If you're the Heat, you can get those free agents. So you don't necessarily need to tank. But if you're, for example, the Bucks or the Pistons or the Sixers, something like that, where guys don't necessarily want to sign as free agents to big contracts because you're in the middle of nowhere, then I think the whole idea of tanking is not always a bad idea if you're transparent with the fans, in a way that's as transparent as possible, and say, like, for example, the phrase trust the process. And people began to not trust the process, but Hinkie basically was pretty honest about what he was doing, which was, I'm expecting to strike out, but this is a star-driven league, and I want to hit a few home runs. And he did. And he got Embiid. He got Simmons. We'll see about Fultz. I mean, Hingie didn't draft Fultz, but we'll see about those guys. But the team looks like it has some star power now. And they could have gone on and, done what they were doing, which was, hang on to guys like Jrue Holiday and Thaddeus Young and stuff and continue to be around 41 and 41 and make the playoffs as this 7th or 8th seed, but never take that next step, but also never fall off. Or, they can, do what they did. And again, it's definitely a dilemma because it's going to piss off the fan bases. But, in the long run, I do think that it's a better strategy for building a championship team, especially in a market that doesn't bring in the free agents. So, the Grizzlies are going to get a high pick this year, obviously. The Suns will have a high pick as well. The Suns have had high picks. I don't even think the Suns are tanking. I just think they're bad at running the team, honestly. I don't understand some of their draft picks. I don't understand some of the moves they've made. It's just like Dragan Bender. I get that everyone wanted Porzingis, but Dragan Bender is not Porzingis. Porzingis has the athleticism of Porzingis is almost as freakish as Shaq was. Shaq was 7'1", 350 pounds, but could run as fast as guys half his size and had the quickest feet I've ever seen for a big man in terms of just being oversized. So it was really nuts. And you see Porzingis. Porzingis is not just a guy that can shoot the ball. In fact, I don't even think shooting is his biggest strength. I think his biggest strength is his athleticism and his ability to move at 7'3" as if he was 6'10". And he can shoot the ball. That's good. I don't even consider him necessarily a shooter. And everyone who tries to compare him to Dirk Nowitzki doesn't really, look at what Porzingis actually is. Porzingis is an athletic freak whose game is amplified by the fact that he can shoot the three, which allows him to, get to the rim more, and play all over the court. I think if you want to look at a Dirk Nowitzki comparison, I think Lauri Markkanen is probably closer to Dirk. Markkanen is basically, a guy at 7 feet who's a really, really good pure shooter and can also score, all over the court. I think Markkanen is far closer to Dirk than Porzingis is. So, again, I think I was talking about the Suns. The Suns I just don't get how they keep messing this up. It seems like they're basically hopeless at this point. It's actually kind of sad. Devin Booker's okay. I like Devin Booker. He's fine. I think he's a little bit overrated. And it's not because he's not a good player. I think he's a solid player. He doesn't seem to really be a great defender. And he hasn't added a ton of other aspects to his game. He can facilitate a little bit. He can rebound a little bit, but he's not great at either one of those things. He's also not very efficient. I mean, his scoring has gone up and his efficiency has stayed pretty much the same over the course of his career. He's become a little bit higher of a percentage shooter, but he doesn't get to the line as much as guys usually do in his position. For example, he's been compared to Kobe. But Kobe got to the line a lot more than Booker does. Kobe was also a really good defender. Booker's not the same type of defender. So, Kobe was a little bit more versatile. And I like Booker, but I think at this point, people are talking about him as if he's the star of the team. Well, to me, he looks like a really good scorer, but I just don't see him being the best player on a championship team. And I think if you're trying to build your team around him, I don't necessarily think you're going to be winning. I think it's going to end up having the same, if not an even lesser impact than, when the Knicks tried to build around Carmelo and ended up being just a fringe playoff team. Carmelo was an excellent scorer and pretty good rebounder too. Not the kind of guy you want to build the entire team around because he's not multi-talented enough. He doesn't defend well. He's not a great passer. He just doesn't have enough facets of his game where if you're paying him max money and building your team around him, you're probably not going to win the championship. So I like Booker, but I worry that he's starting to become a little bit overhyped, a little bit overvalued, and I don't think he's that kind of guy. I don't think he's the guy there. That being said, they've botched so many draft picks. It's really quite interesting. Josh Jackson looks pretty decent, I will say. I like Josh Jackson. I like the way he plays. He's obviously, small forward sort of in the newer type of mold where, kind of like what Taurean Prince seems to be for the Hawks. He can rebound a little bit. He can shoot the ball. He'll get his shot will get better over time. I mean, so for example, everyone criticizes Lonzo Ball for having a bad 3-point percentage and not being able to shoot the ball. Lonzo's 3-point percentage this season is currently better than Kevin Durant's was in Kevin Durant's rookie year. Rookies can't shoot. Like rookies just aren't able to shoot. Rookies don't shoot the ball well. Like LeBron has been known for his shooting efficiency in his career. In his rookie year, he was garbage. So he was really, really bad in his rookie year. And he barely shot 40%, I think. So again, rookies don't shoot the ball well. That's not a new thing. That's never been a new thing. That's always been how it is. And I mean, like, I'm not saying Lonzo Ball's a better shooter than Kevin Durant, but the idea that we should base somebody's offensive ability off their rookie year in terms of their shooting percentage is kind of dumb, because that's something that's just always been the case. And I think Josh Jackson looks like he's going to be pretty decent for the future. He looks like a good defender. I mean, he looks like he can defend probably multiple positions. He looks athletic, but he's not quite there yet, obviously, and he's a little bit raw, especially on offense. But I think he has a higher ceiling than Booker, just because of his ability to defend. I think this has been a pretty good rookie class too. I mean, Jason Tatum looks pretty good as well on Boston. I think he's benefited from being in a good situation at the right time, with Gordon Hayward unfortunately getting injured for most of the season. But I mean, Tatum still has done a pretty good job stepping up. I mean, he can shoot the ball well. It looks like he can score off the dribble a little bit. And then De'Aaron Fox looks kind of interesting as well. I heard something interesting. I don't know if this is true. I don't know where to look for this. If anyone knows where to look, tell me. But De'Aaron Fox apparently has the worst plus-minus stat in the entire NBA or something. I don't know if that's true. I could be just saying stuff, but that'd be kind of interesting. De'Aaron Fox looks pretty decent, though. I was watching the Heat play the Kings the other night. The Kings have some nice young guys. It's pretty fun to watch. I mean, they were hitting a bunch of threes. It was really irritating, actually. But I mean, Justin Jackson looked pretty good. And I know he's sort of considered a bust so far, but he looked like he could shoot the ball pretty well. And then Frank Mason, or whatever his name is, that guy was finishing on fast breaks. It was pretty fun to watch. I mean, I've always, I don't know what the Sacramento Kings are trying to do exactly. And I guess we'll see, but they don't really seem to be able to commit to a certain type of player. Like, I like Buddy Hield. I think Buddy Hield in the ideal situation is probably a six-man in the same sort of mold that maybe Ben Gordon was. I think Fox is a good building block. He's a good defender. He looks like he'll be able to sort of improve his jumper, and he can take it to the rim. I mean, I think he's a pretty good building block. I think Willie Cauley-Stein is a solid starting center on a good team, but I don't think you can expect him to do much more than what he's doing right now. It looks like he's pretty much hit his peak in terms of his production. He's still a pretty efficient guy. I think I would be happy if he was a starting center on my team, but not if he's the best player. I mean, they obviously didn't want Marquise Chris. Everyone criticized them for that at the time last year. And I mean, Skal Labissiere looks pretty decent. I mean, they just released that European guy whose name I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce. So, I mean, I guess if you consider Skal Labissiere part of their future, I mean, he's looked pretty decent. He's regressed though this season. I mean, they obviously have they have Justin Jackson there as well. Harry Giles will be coming back next year. But again, I don't know what to expect from him, just because, he almost looked lost in college. And then they have a bunch of guys that are ancient. It's actually kind of funny. Zach Randolph and Vince Carter are just, I don't know how they fit in there. And Bogdan Bogdanovic looks pretty decent. I don't know if you're going to see him get much better, though. I think you've pretty much seen, because he's 25. He's basically in his prime. He's basically about to enter his prime. I don't think he'll improve much more. So, I guess we'll see what happens with that team. I mean, it looks like they're going to be picking high again. I mean, it's probably a good thing that they got rid of Boogie, just because I just don't think he fit in with the younger guys there. I think he was sort of holding them back a little bit. But yeah, so and let's take a look and see something. The Pacers have been a real surprise this year. Side note, that's been really crazy. So I'm gonna take a look at the Thunder because the Thunder have sort of been putting it together lately as well. I don't think Carmelo's a really good fit there. I never really thought that. I don't know why everyone thought he was going to be so good there. When you have a guy like Russell Westbrook on the team, and it's automatically a guy like Carmelo Anthony doesn't seem to fit. I saw a stat when that trade happened, where the Paul George trade happened, the first one, where it said that Paul George, out of all the stars in the league last season, he scored the most off ball, I think. So he like a catch and shoot type thing. He scored the most of those. But Carmelo obviously was not on that list. So, I think I never really understood that when it happened. I still don't necessarily know if I understand it. But yeah, Carmelo is struggling as I expected. Paul George looks pretty decent in that offense, though. He gets to the line pretty well. He shoots well at the line. He's a good defender. Anyways, I think I'm going to wrap this up. I don't really have much more to talk about. Doesn't seem like a lot of people coming in. I will probably do another one of these tomorrow morning or tomorrow during the day if I have time. So I hope you guys, anyone who popped in, enjoyed it. And I will see you guys tomorrow morning if you want to come in and watch. Have a good day.